Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today, we welcome back a special guest we've had on a few times over the years, and that's Brian from Santiment. How are you, Brian?
Great, Alex. Long time no talk. I'm really excited to talk markets with you. We've got quite a bit we can go over since we last talked in 2022, I believe.
Yeah, it's an interesting stage compared to where we were 12 months ago, and I guess the people are asking, is the bottom definitely in? And we're going to go over what we can see in terms of on-chain metrics as well as sentiment, which you guys specialize in with all your data. Have a look at the altcoins lagging and where we're at in the cycle in terms of where they might be, as well as that all the sentiment metrics that pop up on Twitter and whatnot. But I guess just in general, we're talking before the call just briefly. I'm still leaning towards very strongly that the bottom was in, and we're not going to see lower than 15k on Bitcoin, and that Ethereum's almost leading this market. It's been lagging a little bit in recent months. We've got to remember it got down to $800, so it's still more than doubled off its lows. And then I think altcoins are just getting ready as the cycle typically goes to take off. So, what are your sort of broad thoughts before we get into the nuance?
Yeah. So I guess, one thing that's still lingering is the euphoria from the ETFs that were announced with BlackRock and many of the others. And obviously, we had that late June rally that kind of tapered off right toward, I think, the beginning of July. And Bitcoin and Ethereum started to correct a little. And altcoins have really been kind of hammered. There are exceptions. XRP went on a huge run. Solana, I think earlier today, here in the U.S., went on a big run. Um, but for the most part, there's a lot of lagging in altcoins right now, and it's causing a lot of FUD and general uneasiness from the average trader out there. And that's really one of our biggest signals at Sentiment is seeing where the crowd is leaning toward as a whole. It's never unanimous one way or another, obviously, but if there's a much larger percentage that's notably against the markets or having disbelief, it does dramatically increase the likelihood of prices rising.
Yeah.
Crypto markets generally move the opposite direction of the crowd's expectation. So, yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, and as you say, there's some individual altcoins going off, and there's some little narratives, and there's a lot of meme coins. It feels a little bit like that's kind of old money that's playing around to pump certain things. But I think there's been new money at least come into Bitcoin and Ethereum, particularly off the back of the Bitcoin ETF news, which I think is going to get front run. I think the halving is probably going to get front run more than ever because this really is the first cycle where it's been pretty widely known to the general public, and all investors kind of know what Bitcoin is and a Bitcoin ETF's on the way. So I'm really interested to see if we get a different timed peak in this cycle rather than the run, the fall through the halving and then a super run. We might even get it beforehand. Have you thought about that at all? Or?
Yeah, totally. I think you nailed it when you said this is really the first halving where it's kind of mainstream anticipated, where the
Hmm.
previous ones were not really generally understood because the mainstream was a fraction of what it is now.
Yeah.
Um, and generally, with these kinds of events, the more people who are anticipating it, the less impact it has because there's more of that baked in feeling to it of uh, people already know it's happening. So they're positioning themselves based on what they think is going to happen. So by the time it happens, if everyone or the majority of people are positioning themselves that way, the the firework we're all expecting is more of just a little fizzle. The Ethereum merge last September, 10 months ago, is a perfect example. That's the first big event since the halving for Bitcoin was back in 2019 or 2020, I should say. And a lot of people were so bearish on crypto at that time, it didn't matter as much. But
Mm.
Ethereum was really the first major token where everyone was talking about it. Ethereum's going to go back to 2K, go to 3K, whatever. Ended up happening where there was a gradual climb before the merge. And then when the actual merge happened, we see the price of Ethereum drop off by a couple $100. Um, I'm not going to say that's what will happen here with Bitcoin. It depends on so many factors, based on how people feel about crypto, whether all of crypto had been falling prior to the merge. So many things can happen. But um, if you see kind of everyone is euphoric about the upcoming halving, watch out for when the actual halving happens because it can rug pull a lot of people and make them confused when the actual outcome is negative.
Yeah, or the second part of the cycle could be more excitement towards altcoins and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to keep my finger on the pulse with all that
100%.
stuff. But do you want to dive into all these great slides and metrics you've got prepared for us, Brian?
Yeah, and we'll keep this kind of open-ended, and I'll go through several of our biggest statistics at the moment, and we'll just stop and talk about the big highlights as we go. But so we're looking at the last 30 days of price performances right now. And it's a little bit skewed on the axis because we have this one outlier asset sticking out, Fantasy Gold, which is one of those weird altcoins that's kind of stuck in wallets. And there's no way to, at least maybe things have changed since I last checked. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, chat. But yeah, right now, Fantasy Gold is kind of unsellable and unmovable. So it's kind of going through all these weird price fluctuations, and everyone's kind of just shrugging because it's not really worth anything until it can be
Yeah.
actually sold.
Yeah.
But besides that, if we kind of just highlight over some of these empty areas, we can see that Bitcoin's dropped about 4.2%, Ethereum down about 0.4%. Not really big swings, right? 4.2% is something, and people don't love to see Bitcoin back below 30K, and that's a big psychological support. But 4.2 in 30 days, people have been through far crazier swings than that. And then we do get into some altcoins, right? We see Stellar up 62% over the past 30 days, Maker up 72%, BitDAO 43, Sinfin 92%. So yeah, I can point out some of those outliers, but for the most part, assets are kind of just sitting and not doing a whole lot of exciting things right now. They're seeing some volatility. You know, Dogecoin went on a run a week ago, Solana earlier today, XRP after the big SEC victory where people were euphoric about it. But for the most part, we're in this stagnant cycle that really has started about 4 weeks ago, ever since the euphoria was starting to die down from the ETF news.
Yeah.
And we're looking for some sign of hope going into August. Obviously, the Litecoin halving is the next big thing that people are keeping their eye on. But yeah, I'm curious what you've kind of seen just in terms of the overall top 100 market cap assets here.
A lot of our research has probably been on the coins that are outside the top 100, to be honest. But I do think that one of the narratives we had was that the older proof of work coins would come back into favor because of regulatory certainty. And when we had that new Wall Street exchange come online, the name escapes me now, backed by all the big banks and whatnot, and they listed Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, as well as Bitcoin and ETH. So I think that's kind of one theme, like that safety, where we might see top 10 indexes as the next products after we get a Bitcoin ETF and whatnot. But no, I'm looking more at those emerging narratives like scaling, real world assets. I think gaming is going to have a return. And yeah, a lot of the layer 2 transactional stuff that's going to benefit all those different sectors as well. Some of those layer 2s really maturing.
Right. Yeah, and you know, besides BlackRock, a lot of things that about the ETFs that people are overlooking is the fact that many of them are just announcements or intent to create the ETFs. They're not actually released yet. So naturally, there's going to be a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the lack of news in this case right now. So all these other ETFs kind of announce themselves as a result of BlackRock being positively received, but BlackRock and maybe one or two others are the only ones, as far as I know, that exist so far.
Yeah, and then Grayscale or Barry Silbert came out today and said we don't believe that the Coinbase custody or asset monitoring is up to scratch. Threw a bit of cold water on it all. Maybe a bit of self-protection there of their own interests with the Grayscale GBTC fund. But it would be interesting if all those ETFs get knocked back, how the market's going to react as well.
Agreed. Yeah, that would be a bad blow for crypto if that does happen. So we're obviously crossing our fingers that it doesn't. But like a lot of things in crypto, it's almost like we hear about these rumors and they're never quite fully confirmed or non-confirmed. It's kind of just in that gray area. Like even the SEC lawsuit for XRP. Yes, XRP got the victory and we're not deemed to be a security, but then we get this news that the SEC is going to appeal. And are we going to
Yeah.
wait like a year for that to happen? So it's never
Yeah.
ending.
So on news announcements like that, if XRP didn't sell off too much further, it's already had a bit of a retrace from that huge move. And if these Bitcoin ETFs were to get knocked back, but price wasn't to react too negatively, that would also tell me that we're well and truly into a bull market where bad news doesn't actually lead to bad price action. And one of the other themes we've got for this bull market is the move from west to east. So more and more people maybe noticing that America's not that important. Whatever happens in the US, like of course it would be a positive if we get a lot of ETFs and a lot of money can flow in. But we've sort of seen China, Russia, these other places start to cozy up to Bitcoin a little bit more. And if we're getting hundreds of millions of people sign up from all these other countries, the US becomes less and less significant. So that's probably another
Right.
theme we're watching out for.
Yeah, that's very valid. In the long term, it's probably not a bad thing that U.S. is not the dominant force. No country should be the dominant force in a global currency that has no intended to have no borderlines. But
Yeah.
we obviously want to make sure that it is not controlled by any one country, whether it be China, Russia, regardless of your politics. If governments can restrict and unrestrict assets at any given time, that can cause a lot of planned chaos that would not be favorable to the average Joe.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, Brian, what have you got next for us?
Yeah, and I did want to mention also, I toggled over to social volumes. We were looking at price changes before, but look at all this red. This is the previous 30 days of discussion rates compared to the 30 days before that. And overwhelmingly, it's just a ton of red going on. Bitcoin talked about 72% less, Ethereum 78% less. That's an effect of the ETF excitement kind of wearing off.
Yeah.
And it's not really a bearish sign. If anything, it's a signal that the mainstreamers and the FOMOers who kind of bought in when Bitcoin was at the high 31Ks, they're kind of staying silent now and worrying about the investments they made a month ago.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see as well.
Yeah. I like it.
So moving on to some of the main metrics, these are kind of the key indicators that we usually look at when measuring the overall on-chain and social health of Bitcoin and other assets. And if we look at Bitcoin just over the past 6 months, its transaction volume isn't really moving in the direction we'd want to see. Generally, more utility is good, regardless of what the sentiment is at any given time. And other than the occasional outliers, right, we're just kind of seeing a pattern of gradual decline, give or take, like that. That's not what we really want to see. And when on-chain transaction is volume is low, and then we also have trading volume that's kind of back and forth, right? We had one crazy weird anomaly on the 20th, but other than that, you can see it's going down as well. It's showing that there's a lot of complacency in Bitcoin, and most other assets are kind of following suit right now.
Yeah, I
So
do
that's interesting.
wonder how many of those transactions were related to ordinals and stamps and that brief euphoria we saw around Bitcoin NFTs. I
Mm-hmm.
also think Bitcoin DeFi is a theme to watch that's going to take off in this market cycle, by the way, with stablecoins and NFTs and other assets coming onto Bitcoin or its side chains. But also, I guess the flip side is maybe it's a positive if there's fewer and fewer coins around. If we are going to get these ETFs that are going to need to buy up large numbers of real coins, and if more and more people are just seeing it as that store of value rather than a transactional use case, because there's just so many transactions on all these layer twos or some of the alternate layer one chains like Solana and that, as you say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's especially the Bitcoin DeFi stuff. It could be a big game changer, not just for BTC, but for all assets. So if you're an altcoiner out there, you should be rooting for the Bitcoin DeFi stuff to be a success.
Yeah, yeah,
Besides on-chain transaction volume, we're seeing kind of stagnancy on the daily active address side. These are basically the amount of unique addresses moving on the BTC network on a day-to-day basis. Pretty flat, about a give or take 920 to 950,000 daily active addresses per day. And then on the circulation side, the amount of unique tokens moving on a day-to-day basis, basically excluding wash trading coins that are moving back and forth over and over again, it's not looking like there's an increase going on at all by this 30-day trend line right here. It's just indicating, if anything, it's still on a decline. And compared to 6 months ago, we're at a lower point now. So again, I think that there needs to be an event, whether it's a big swing up to get people back in and moving tokens, or a big swing down to get people to panic sell. Both can be fine for Bitcoin, because that's what gets the ball moving and starts up the proper amount of utility that typically justifies a long-term gain for an asset.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Nice.
We can also look at MVRV here. This is one of my favorite metrics, and what it shows is how the average trader is doing at any given time. 30-day, which is kind of our short to midterm kind of swing trader cycle for people who are buying and selling every few days or once or twice a week. It's showing that the active addresses on the Bitcoin network for 30-day traders has fallen back into the negative territory, which is actually a good thing. We want to see the average trader down money. People think we're all in this together and we're all getting Lambos together. Not how it works. It's how Twitter tells you it should work, but it's not. What we really see is a few whales capitalizing every time MVRV looks like this, and the average trader is down 10% for the month, or 20, 30% for the year, something like that. And that's when those big whales and sharks scoop up a crap ton of BTC and make all of the fudsters out there wish that they hadn't sold down here once it's back up here. So now we're kind of in this spot where on the short and midterm side, we are in the negatives with the average trader down about 3%. But on the long-term scale, people probably remember the fact that we've still had a pretty good 2023 so far, with the year starting around 17K BTC. And now we're up at 29. Like, it's a matter of perspective. So the long-term traders are still sitting pretty nicely at about plus 19%. We would ideally like to see this come down a bit more. So if you're looking for a timing tell, the probability of a big jump like what we saw here or here, it goes up immensely if you see both the long-term and the short/midterm in the negative territory below the zero axis. And that's not the case yet. We want a setup like this or a setup like this. Sometimes it never happens, but it increases the probability significantly if you start to see them kind of at break even or a little bit below.
Yeah, I think it's these style of metrics that I'm most interested in at the moment, with people saying, oh, whales are using any spike in the market to get out because they think new lows are coming. And I don't agree with that.
Yeah. Same. I mean, they're looking at the amount of pain that traders are in, and they're looking at how many people are selling under panicked conditions. And obviously the whales they go through cycles where they're waiting to get back in after taking some big profit on the last time this happened.
Yeah.
And the easiest time to get in is when everyone else the retail traders are just pushing the price down to a juicy number for them again. And on that MVRV subject, these are all of the assets that are either semi-underbought or overbought in green here. And there's a ton of them, right? There are very few that are actually showing semi-overbought or overbought. XRP makes sense considering how much of a rule they had been on, especially earlier in July with the SEC lawsuit news. But overwhelmingly, you can see, I don't know, just eyeballing this, 85%, 90% of these assets are showing an undervaluation just strictly based on the average trading returns that are going on right now. And there's a few big outliers that you probably haven't thought about for a long time because they've been hemorrhaging for so long. QuickSwap being one of them, Magic Token, Bounce, just to give you a few freebies on what our Sandbase Pro models are showing right now. Doesn't mean those are the best three buys, but just based on a probability standpoint, when you're looking at kind of a getting back to the mean for what an asset's zero sum is supposed to look like. Those are the three that have the most making up to do right now based on trader bloody streets, if you will.
Yeah, putting the probabilities back in your favor as long as you like the actual project itself for the technical analysis or whatever. It's just another ball to have in your court, isn't it? Yeah.
Great point. And if the asset is hemorrhaging because of something fundamentally wrong or there was a rug pull, obviously that goes beyond the metrics, and you've got to do your research to make sure you're not just investing in a name based on a metric.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great point there. Funding rates, we look at this from time to time too, because this is where people are putting their money where their mouth is, and not just talking about an asset on Twitter, but what is actually going on with their money. Are they leveraging longs? Are they leveraging shorts? Something in between? And really on these extreme cycles here, when there's big shorts, these are, as you would expect, the ideal time to buy, because when shorts are prominent, it increases the likelihood that if there is a rise, these shorts are just going to add rocket fuel to the price being able to surge up. Not a perfect example here, but a very good example here, where you just saw liquidations of so many shorts happening in mid-March when people were trying to ride this very small bounce down to another low, and they got fooled completely. Tons of liquidations happening, and obviously from the very shortest of shorts on March 12th there up until right here on April 14th, we're looking at maybe 5 weeks later, Bitcoin went up a cool 39% there. So that's kind of what you want to look for. And then you also want to be careful of the opposite, where there's a big long candle going on. This one was very short-lived, but you can see even this huge candle of longs, there was a retrace there until the longs went away, and then it proceeded to go up again. So funding rate's always a fun one to look at.
So pretty neutral at the moment, really. Maybe a few more longs, but yeah.
Right, exactly. So just not a lot of leaning either way at the moment. We'll kind of skip past whale transactions because whales are showing kind of disinterest at the moment, which isn't really good or bad. It just means that they're kind of sitting on the sidelines and they're comfortable with the ranging that's going on, waiting for the crowd to push prices one way or another.
Yeah, and it's often the case when Bitcoin's had that decent run, as you say, and then it's got to be allowed to go sideways for some time, and that's when we typically see people get bored and say, let's play around with some altcoins, which is kind of my gut feel that those altcoins are getting ready to go now, while Bitcoin might go sideways for a little bit before its next run.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the metrics are showing too. Obviously, never a guarantee, and neither Alex or I are here to give investment advice, but more often than not, when you kind of see all these altcoins showing big time underbought signals, it's not a bad time to at least start to dip your toes in if you're trying to trade perfectly with what normally happens historically with these cycles. Bitcoin sitting right at neutral, and then you've got all these altcoins showing underbought, semi-underbought. That's a pretty good sign that you could take some risks and be right here.
Yeah.
And yeah, as far as the context of whales, because it's one of our most asked about subjects, we've got a cool nifty template here that shows a few different things. Bitcoin is this bright green line that's showing addresses holding anywhere between 10 to 10,000 BTC. And it went through a nice little accumulation phase. This was right at the beginning of the ETF announcements. I think the 15th is when it really became kind of mainstream knowledge, but you can already see they maybe heard some rumors ahead of time. No such thing as insider trading in crypto, right? Because of the lack of regulation, but they heard about something here and they were accumulating just before prices took off. And then once it did, you can see this big profit take right here where they dumped a lot of the percentage of the supply back on retail traders. And that was a probable sign that we were getting close to a top. We got one more tiny, very short-lived blip, and then it just started to bleed again. And that's exactly what the whales are doing. So it's kind of parallel to sharks and whales at the moment. And that's pretty expected with these types of supply distribution metrics that we look through.
Yeah.
And like one thing we can look at besides just Bitcoin is how are the stablecoin holders doing? Because if you look at 10 to 10,000 BTC, often it'll be inverse to what is happening with, the tether holders that are holding anywhere between $100,000 to maybe $10 million. That's kind of the range that we like to look at for those big holders that aren't quite just exchange addresses and they are just stagnant sitting on Binance or Coinbase, what have you.
Yeah.
But you can see clearly Tether, in order for that rise to happen, the whales were taking a lot from their Tether holdings. And that's actually not the greatest sign. We would rather see Bitcoin going up, but Tether staying the same, which would imply that they're bringing in new money from fiat and their bank accounts wherever they are in the world. So that wasn't the case here. Even though Tether is going down, though, you can see USD coin, the second largest stable coin by market cap, that's looking pretty nice after that big scare that happened way back in March. For those who remember, it's just taken off right now and looking pretty nice. BUSD, say what you will about Binance's native stablecoin, it kind of took a hit in reputation, kind of by proximity after FTT and that whole collapse back in November.
Yeah.
But you can see clearly BUSD is getting collected quite rapidly by the sharks and whales right now. DAI, same thing. These are all top 5 stablecoins. So it's looking pretty good for stablecoins unless you're talking about Tether, because Tether was for sure being exchanged for Bitcoin on that brief rise up to about 32K last month. So a little iffy right now due to the fact that Bitcoin and Tether are both stagnant or slightly leaning down. We'd like to see that reverse as a good signal for another jump back up to 30K and beyond.
Yeah, that all makes sense. It's always good to watch those stable coins, how they're being deployed, and if there's more dry powder, as you say.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, the only other thing I would mention as part of our main metrics to look at, the social dominance of Bitcoin is always a fascinating metric to me because it sounds counterintuitive, but when people are talking about Bitcoin a lot in relation to altcoins, it's actually a sign of fear because people are most greedy and euphoric about crypto when they're talking about Dogecoin and they're talking about WorldCoin and all the latest assets that are coming out. And that doesn't mean I'm not saying what is a good or bad asset out there, but generally speaking, the crowd looks at speculative assets more when they're confident in the markets, right? Just like if you're looking at equities, people are in ETFs and index funds more when they have no idea what's going to happen. But if they're really confident in the markets, that's when they put a whole bunch of money into Meta or into Google or Amazon, those more volatile. So high dominance, like we're seeing right now, is actually a sign of fear, which Alex and I were talking about at the beginning of the call. People are a little bit concerned with the stagnancy that crypto has started to see over the past month. And that's causing more of a flock back to BTC and away from, the interest in XRP and all the stuff that was being talked about at the beginning of the month.
Yeah. Yeah, another great metric.
We actually did a poll too. I was telling Alex about this right before the call. We asked people, based on Bitcoin currently being at 29.3K or so, Ethereum being at 1860, which of these 4 scenarios do you think is going to happen next? Bitcoin above 32K, Bitcoin below 27K, Ethereum above 2K, Ethereum below 17. So we're kind of right in the middle of those 2 ranges. And both Bitcoin and Ethereum predictors have more percentages going toward prices dropping. And that is a good sign if you're a patient holder, seeing that the crowd is starting to skew bearish, especially in a forum like Twitter, which by default is normally skewing a little bit bullish. So that says something.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the favorite ingredients of mine for this stage of the market, where it feels like it's the disbelief and there's still more people expecting it to go low. I think that's healthy for future further upwards price action.
Yeah, 100%. So it's interesting to see when people are kind of it's obviously not unanimous. It's never going to be unanimous. But the further people start to push toward fear, the more confident you should feel if you're holding on tight and not budging your
Yeah.
portfolio too much.
Yeah. Fantastic. What's next for us, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, we can open it up from here, talk about anything that's going on in the news. I can also show, um, I mean, Santiment's got such endless tools. Yeah, I work for Santiment, and I truly believe that. But I can tell you that the chat has been all over the place. We can see that today people were talking a little bit about Sam Bankman-Fried based on a new development in the trial. Do you know a little more about that, Alex? Because I didn't. I only saw like one quick tweet about him.
Something about political donations not being clawed back, I think, was the thing that I read today.
Got it.
And obviously, the other big news, you've got aliens and UFOs in there. I know that's been all the rage at the
Yeah.
hearing in Washington as well, which I think a lot of our audience find interesting. But yeah, I've certainly something I've been interested in for decades. And it's funny to see that all coming to the forefront. And crypto Twitter, the type of people that like these sort of alternate discussions as well.
Oh yeah. We'll see stuff all the time related to Trump, related to climate change, all sorts of things. And this is basically scraping all of the public crypto forums that we have access to on Twitter, Telegram, Discord, Reddit, and even 4chan. So you can like look in detail on the context for any of it. If I just like look at buy the dip, for example, it's going to show me the social volume for buying the dip, and it'll actually show by platform here. So we can see, Reddit had a big, interestingly, they got it kind of right, while other platforms weren't really talking about buying the dip at the time. But no, there's a lot of potential here to look up any query you'd like. It works a little bit like, God, I'm blanking on the name, the Google trends page where you can look up anything. But this is specifically for crypto forums, so you get a much more granular, hyper-focused look at what the crypto crowd in particular thinks about any particular topic.
Have you got any good metrics that you'd go to maybe show that Ethereum is leading or could be continuing to lead this market cycle, just like it bottomed and didn't make that new low when Bitcoin did? Is there anything on chain showing people are holding firm, or a lot more people are staking as well now, which is going to lock up a lot of coins? What have you got?
Yeah, totally. That's a really good question. We always like to look at Ethereum as kind of a reflection of maybe a start of an altcoin cycle. Some people argue Ethereum isn't an altcoin itself. Doesn't matter what your opinion is. The point is, when Ethereum starts to lead above Bitcoin, it usually is a breadcrumb revealing that at least a mini altcoin rally could be on the horizon. Yeah. And right now, I mean, this is kind of a short sample size, and it's very interesting to see, but Bitcoin is actually showing some pretty big loss transactions compared to profit transactions, while Ethereum, it's a little hard to see. If I just take off everything except BTC and ETH for a minute. So if we look at them directly, yeah, so Ethereum's kind of just sitting pretty neutral. And the higher up we see an asset, that is indicating that there is more profiting happening than loss taking, meaning the time that the asset entered that address compared to when it's leaving, if there was a higher level, then when it's leaving, it's a loss. Vice versa, it's a profit. So Ethereum's kind of just hanging out, being in the middle right now, whereas Bitcoin is actually seeing some pretty heavy capitulation just in the first couple days of the new week. Our new week, for whatever reason on this chart, starts on a Thursday. Don't ask me why. But just starting the week, we're seeing Bitcoin seeing tons of interesting capitulation, which is a good sign for Bitcoin holders because it is likely going to pop more so than Ethereum, at least until this bar gets back toward neutral. Whichever bar between the two is lower, that is generally which asset has a higher likelihood of spiking above the other, if that makes sense.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's probably pretty much everything my end, Brian. Questions I had, unless there's any final things you want to show us, but I'll definitely put the links all down below. You guys are generous on all your socials with your free stuff, and obviously you've got all your premium products as well.
Yeah, of course, man. I think these calls are awesome. Santiment always loves catching up with the Nuggets news community, and your insights are really invaluable to our community, and gives a lot of context in terms of the news stories going on, and it really pairs well with us. So yeah, I hope we can do more, and I want to thank the Nuggets news community and our own community watching this for your continued support as markets are kind of treading in the mud right now, waiting for something to happen. This is where the big traders kind of separate, or the solid traders separate from the newbies out there, and patience is usually a virtue. So looking forward to the next one for sure with you, Alex.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a super interesting 12 months ahead, whether it's crypto markets or just where the world's heading at the moment. So I'll have to catch up again in future.
Would love it.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Thanks, guys.